Hello and welcome to the Metapod, the Pokemon TCG podcast that revolves around the evolving meta, but also the revolving world. I just want to real quick before we get started, give a quick shout out to Sean for, this is the post-World Championships podcast. We're going to be talking about the recent Pokemon World Championships that just happened over the weekend, if you're listening to this recording when it released. And Sean, for anyone who can't see on YouTube or Spotify, tell us about the life situation that you're in right now.
I mean, you make it sound
well,
so...
yeah, I know, but just go with it. Just go with it.
Yeah, I'll go with it. Yeah. I am. Those of you who can see, you can see that I'm not in my fancy studio in my house. I am actually in Korea at the moment, but I knew I was flying to Korea over Worlds weekend, and I was like, we will not miss this episode of the pod.
I really wanted we both really wanted to have a two-person podcast for the first podcast after Worlds. So, again, big shout out to Sean for bringing unnecessary equipment during his vacation. Should be relaxing, but we've got work to do. And you probably didn't watch too much of Worlds just because, you're flying and traveling.
You'd be surprised. I watched some on Thursday, on Friday, a little bit on Saturday, and I watched the Masters final last night.
Oh, you were watching it at a relatively normal time because Korea is much closer to Japan in terms of time London. Is it close in time to London, or is it actually no? What's the time difference?
But the difference, I don't know what the time difference from London is, but basically it's probably 8 hours ahead, but it was nighttime, right? It was a normal nighttime.
Yeah, it was 4 a.m. where I am. I completely missed the final, but I rewatched it earlier, so during a normal time. But we've got a lot to talk about today. Not only are we going to talk about the World Championships of the Pokemon trading card game, but we're also going to talk about some news that came out of the Pokemon World Championships, because every year, if you are unaware, maybe this was your first time watching Worlds, they like to announce kind of the next card mechanic type deal, next location, stuff like that. So we're going to be mentioning a couple of those things today. But before we talk about the World Championships, let us get into the lovely 5-star review. As we go over every week that we have new reviews, we talk about all the kind words that you've left us. Top tier Pokemon TCG content. This was left by Fletchling Pokemon. This is a person I've actually met before, Sean. It was when I went to Full Grip, actually. I met Fletchling.
Nice,
so that was really cool, and they're a wonderful person. I see them on Twitter now all the time. I think they're starting to think about making content as well. So Fletchling Pokemon, go follow them on content. They're a kind human being. I've listened to a lot of Pokemon TCG podcasts, and this one is far and away my favorite. This show has a great flow. The hosts have a very personable and a great team, and the content is top notch for TCG players of all skill levels. Can't recommend highly enough. Fletchling, thank you so much for the kind words, friend. We super appreciate it. But Sean, we have top level TCG content, I would say, especially when it revolves around the Pokemon trading card game. But I think we can both agree that we were way off on what we thought would happen at Worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll get into it, but to remind people who maybe didn't listen to last week's episode or forgot.
Oh, did you write down notes?
Oh, I just remembered, Jake. I remember what we predicted.
See, we did so bad that I just kind of blocked it out, but I know we did bad.
Quick recap. You asked me, what do I think is most likely to win? I said an Arceus deck, which is the most broad statement ever. And because
what color is the sky, Sean?
Right.
Some type of blue.
Yeah. So I'm okay, fine. Arceus, that was hedging my bets quite a lot. And then I think you were I actually think this might be the year for Control. Mewtwo V Union, super strong, right? And then when we said okay, what was the deck that we think is going to underperform? We both agree that we think Palkia might underperform just because everybody expects it. So, Jake, do you want to run people through that top 8?
Before we do that, though, let's give a quick shout out to all of the podcast hosts in the Pokemon trading card game that that I know of, when I was making and typing out the notes for this week's show. I wanted to give a quick shout out to the podcasters of the Pokemon trading card game that competed at the World Championships, because like people have said, there's a lot of Pokemon TCG podcasts, and I listen to several of them, and I support a lot of them are my friends. So Sean and I both support them. So we want to give them that quick shout out. Azul GG from Uncommon Energy finished 26th at the World Championships playing Ice Rider Palkia Bibarel. JW Kreewall placed 44th. JW Kreewall, part of Tag Team, I would say is like the OG TCG competitive podcast, or at least the first one that I started listening to, with what we're going to call the new ADP. Sean, that's what this deck has been dubbed nickname-wise by Ian Robb, so we'll get into what that exactly is later. It's actually a really, really cool deck, and I'm very excited to talk about it. Riley Hulbert also completed, but I don't know how they did or what they played because they didn't tweet the deck list or anything like that, but they were there because him and JW got a picture together at World. So super awesome. And then Kevin Clemente, Lake of Rage, went 4-2-2 on day one, so didn't necessarily make day two, but after starting 0-2, they played it out and went 4-2-2. They were literally like one win and one tie away from qualifying for day two. So excellent job, pushing, even when you had nothing to lose, just keep going. A lot of people would have dropped, things like that. So super happy for Kevin. Playing Radiant Charizard and Teleon, which was a really, really cool deck, if you do not know. That's one that we actually mentioned last week. I made fun of him at Locals for going 0-2 with the deck, so it's kind of something like that. But I know his buddy from his Locals that went to Worlds as well did really well with the deck, so it is a viable deck. And then finally, Brent Halliburton. I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. I just know you as Brent. That is from the Trashalanch podcast. Now, I don't know if Brent actually played at Worlds, but his son Liam actually won the seniors division of the World Championships with Palkia. So that's a big shout out. So congratulations to Brent's son, and honestly his family. I'm sure Brent did a bunch of help in preparing Liam for the championships. But Sean, we gotta go into the results, the world champion results. So why don't I switch the camera for those of you watching on the video thing? This is like one of the first times I've had to run the logistics of the podcast, and it's tough. Anyways, big respect to Sean. But here is the top 8 if you are watching this on YouTube or Spotify. There are 3 Palkia variant decks, and I say variant, we'll get
4.
into why there's 4. Or I'm sorry, not Palkia. I meant Arceus. I was looking at Arceus and I said Palkia. There were 3 kind of Arceus variant decks, although they kind of all have the same thing with Flying Pikachu, but there are some minute differences that really change the tide in the way of the top 8. So we'll get into that more in a second. Palkia was also a part of the top 8 to not anyone's surprise but us. We were surprised, I guess you could say. That had 4 of the top 8 spots. So really showing us up, telling us that we're dumb. But that's okay, because you can't be right every single time. We've been right on this podcast. Now we've been wrong. So now you can trust us. And then there was also a Mew VMAX, which I would say is kind of also an L for our predictions, at least for me. I said that Mew has just really fallen off, and it was a safe day 1 pick, but not necessarily day 2 and beyond. But this was the top 8. Sean, does it surprise you at all, aside from Palkia, I guess?
I surprise. I think the prevalence of Flying Pikachu is the main surprise. It makes sense, right? Like, because Palkia is so strong and so many people played it, the players here who chose to play Arceus Flying Pikachu specifically had a good matchup relative, right? It's not easy, but like, it's a good matchup, and like, yeah, they're gonna do well. So that was the surprise, though, is like that all of the Arceus variants that made it were all Flying Pikachu ones, and there was no Arc Intels, no other Arceus variants, just all Flying Pikachu.
I will say, though, in terms of the flying Pikachu, I mean, you see people of different countries here, Japan and Czech Republic, I believe. That's where Andre is from. You see two different countries, so pretty much probably two different testing groups on here. There were a lot of different teams, I think, that kind of had this idea about Arceus flying Pikachu, and I don't know if they were all the same as we get more into the deck list here in a moment, but pretty crazy in my opinion, especially because we're going to take a look at Andre's list, and if it's not completely the same, it's pretty close to it. I believe someone ended up net decking this list in terms of watching the stream and kind of putting together this deck, but here it is ADP, the 2022 version, the Sword and Shield version of ADP. Yeah, because the first ADP was in Sun and Moon. This is Arceus V-Star Flying Pikachu, which is your P, but the D, Sean, Hisuian Decidueye. That is a card that I would never have guessed would have been in the World Championship deck. But this one specifically, this ADP variant, plays the Bibarel engine. Sean and I have talked about the Bibarel engine. We love Industrious Incisors, drawing up to 5 cards, makes you Roxanne proof, Marnie proof, and just is really, really good draw engine, I will say. Yeah. And this pretty much just acts as like a counter box. In my opinion. I mean, you start out with Arceus V-Star because Arceus V-Star can make anything good, right? And that has been shown time and time again, and it's a really good way to accelerate energies and maybe get that first knockout. And so then you choose between Flying Pikachu, right, for the weakness on Palkia. We found out in the finals that Flying Pikachu has a weakness, Flying Pikachu. So if you came across a mirror match, you could use Flying Pikachu against Flying Pikachu. And then the Hisuian Decidueye to knock out the Arceus or whatever else is weak to fighting Pokemon.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's like, it's fun. Like it's a weird counter box type strategy. It's interesting too. This list has 4 bosses orders, which I think that the commentators on stream pointed out as well. Shout out to Joe and Wasi, who commentated the finals match. Yeah, like the fact that there's 4 bosses in here means they really are relying on taking those weakness-based knockouts to outspeed their opponents. Because otherwise, without weakness, we're living in a 2-hit meta in many instances, right? Like unless you're getting like power tablets with Mew VMAX or like a full bench, on both sides, plus a choice belt to hit with Palkia V-Star. Otherwise, like outside of those 2 specific scenarios, you're pretty much 2-hit KOing any of the V-Stars or VMAXs in the format. So really saying, hey, I'm going to try to get around that in most of my matchups with boss.
And also, I think I forgot to say, the winner, the person that had this deck list and won the World Championships, Andre Skubal. I probably didn't pronounce that correctly. They're from the Czech Republic, but congratulations to them for winning this. And I remember in the interviews and like on social media and stuff, if this was going around, the biggest thing about this is Andre said, play Bibarel, play 4 boss. He said those were kind of the difference makers, the different 8 cards that made the difference in, especially the top 8 run. And you just mentioned, the value of bosses orders to really capitalize on the weakness and to jump ahead in terms of the prize race. And, this deck is really, really cool, I would say. I love how Azul won NAIC with the Flying Pikachu Arceus, right? And then we thought, it's probably going to have a target on its back now. But then adapting to it and adding the Hisuian Decidueye, a card that I did not have on my radar at all. For sure, I can't even tell you what exactly it does, but we can right now, Sean. Talk about real quick what Hisuian Decidueye does. Hisuian Decidueye. We'll go over the V-Star just to refresh everybody's.
I will say the very first attack on the Decidueye V did make a difference in a couple of matches that I watched. which
Oh,
is
you know what? That is true.
the first attack of the V. I'll just say it real quick. It's Mountain Munch. I don't have it pulled up. I just know what it does.
The first attack for 1 fighting energy. Search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them in your hand, then shuffle your deck. Not bad if you're trying to find specific things and maybe you're just forced to have a Decidueye V at the start. Maybe you don't have Switch or anything like that. But the second attack, Close Quarters Shooting for 100 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's Pokemon. So you can basically get 200 damage on like an RCSV to really finish it off or something of the sort. But I'm gonna pull up the Hisuian Decidueye
V-Star now.
Geez, Hisuian is a weird word to spell, but the V-Star, this is kind of the big kahuna. So it has the V-Star power with the ability Star of Fortune. During your turn, you may draw cards until you have 8 cards in your hand. Sean, I don't recall anybody using this over Starbirth. Do you?
I mean, I didn't see anybody use it on stream. Wouldn't surprise me if it got used once at some point in the game. But
yeah, I would say maybe like, in the early parts before Top Cut or anything like that, maybe used it once because, just like draw until you have 8 cards in your hand can be a really, really good V-Star power. It just so happens that Starbirth is way better. But
yeah,
the main reason why people were using Hisuian Decidueye V-Star was for the attack. For 1 fighting and 2 colorless, Somersault Feathers is 160 base damage plus. You may discard up to 3 energy cards from your hand. This attack does 30 more energy for each card you discarded in this way. You mainly will not, in my opinion, use that extra effect to get extra damage because 160 times 2 on the hit on Arceus is 320. I feel like the main reason that you would use the discarding extra energy cards from your hand is just if you needed a little bit more to finish off another Pokemon that's not necessarily weak to fighting. But that's what that card does. 2 retreat cost, weak to Psychic, which was not relevant at all except for Mew, but Mew's probably going to one-hit knock out you anyway, and if you see a Mew, you face a Mew, you're probably not putting Hisuian Decidueye V in play, but really cool.
I will also say, important to note on that though, like you can, like what I saw a lot of people do is they would Arceus attack and only put 1 fighting energy on and nothing else, because to your point about weakness, right? You can on your next turn attach a double turbo, and yeah, you're only doing 140, but 140 times 2 is 280, which still knocks out the Arceus V-Star. So you only need 2 energy attachments on it to get the knockout on the Arceus as well.
And people would do that same thing with the Flying Pikachu, right? Because with that same concept, you just attach 1 lightning energy. The rest of that cost for Flying Pikachu is double colorless. So you just attach the double turbo, and when you're hitting Palkia for weakness, 320, you're only doing 280. It's going to knock out a Palkia V-Star because usually their choice of items, which we'll go over later, is like Choice Belt, Tool Jammer, things like that. So you don't have to worry about Big Charms. So very, very cool list in my opinion. This was such a cool surprise. This is what I really loved about the World Championships is surprises like this, innovation, ideas. Even though it's somewhat of the same deck that we've seen before, it's the adaptability on that. But we got to go into the second place finisher, Sean. Daichi Shimada from Japan. Second place, also with ADP. And when I say ADP, it's not necessarily ADP. It's an Arceus. Well, actually, no, it is ADP, but it's a little bit different. Anyways, let me get into it. Arceus V-Star, Flying Pikachu, Hisuian Decidueye, but only playing a 1-1 in comparison to Andre's 2-2. But instead of playing Barrel, a 2-2 line, opted to play Jolteon. Sean, do you remember what this Jolteon is?
I do. It says that your opponent's water Pokemon abilities don't, their opponent's water Pokemon's abilities don't work, basically.
That's essentially what it is, especially if you attach the memory capsule to it. That is how you activate that ability, and Daichi's list playing 3 of them And so pretty much almost the same thing, except switching out Bibarel for the Jolteon, which in favor, if you're Daichi versus Andre, the favor goes to Andre because they don't play water Pokemon with abilities, right? So except a 1 Lumineon, they do. But so that allows you to get a little bit more value out of your support Pokemon. So the Jolteon not coming through in the end, but this again is another innovation that was really, really, really cool in my opinion to see this playing 3 bosses orders. So not very far off of the 4, but I think a lot of people were playing either like 2, 3, or 4 bosses overs, but it also had another attacking option in this, Sean. It had Galarian Moltres V, the old and faithful Galarian Moltres V. You did play a couple dark energies in here, 2 fighting, 2 lightning, 2 dark, 2 memory, or I'm sorry, not memory, 2 capture energies, and then 4 double turbos. Capture energy, the most expensive energy card in its basic rarity, as Sean likes to mention. And so again, just a lot of options, a lot of coverage with this, Sean. An incredibly cool list, I feel like.
Yeah, that Jolteon, by the way, like just pointing out how important that Jolteon was throughout the whole tournament, because you think about it, right? How many decks are playing the Inteleon engine?
A lot.
Yeah, and that for the listeners who don't know, like that is the reason this Jolteon is played, because you turn off that Inteleon engine, you already have a favored matchup, I would say, in many ways against Palkia. But you turn off their engine, and it's just not even a game, right? Not only that, you also turn off Palkia's ability, which allows you to attach 3 water energy from your discard to your Pokemon.
Exactly.
So it's basically doing Path to the Peak plus in that deck. It turns off the Inteleon engine inside of the Arceus Inteleon decks. I think it's a really good meta call. And it was just, pretty, I don't know if it's unfortunate, but pretty strange that he ended up facing kind of a pseudo mirror. So, the one card that got him all the way there, maybe, or, the one strategy didn't end up mattering in the final match.
And you know what? I mean, it's a good run anyways for, the deck's second place. I don't think I'll ever complain about second place or being like, man, I should have played the Bibarel version. But super, super cool, in my opinion. They're pretty close to the same list outside of, the Bibarel engine versus the Jolteon shutdown engine and, an extra attacker in there. So really, really cool to see. It was also really cool. I don't know if it was Daichi or Ryota Ishiyama who actually got third, another player from Japan. Pretty much a similar list. I don't know if it's identical because we're recording shortly after the World Championships have ended. Yeah. So we don't have every single list as of right now, but I don't know if it's exactly the same, but I remember there was a player playing this list, Arceus V-Star with the Jolteon, and there was an interaction that just went on with the Empoleon V. Somebody was playing Empoleon V where if I think it's if it's in the active, it shuts off all your opponent's non-rule box abilities, but because of the Jolteon with the memory capsule having on before the Empoleon came to the active, there's such a weird interaction with those, and I think it actually... No, I don't even know.
No, the Jolteon supersedes the Empoleon is the point.
Yeah, it's just an absolute mess, and I'm glad I'm not a judge because I don't know if I would have been able to figure that out. So shout out to the judges as well for hosting a fair championships, and giving correct calls on that. And as I mentioned, again, Ryota Ishiyama from Japan finished third with a pretty much identical list, we believe, up to this point. And then moving into fourth place, because, fourth place finalist, James Cox from Australia, playing Palkia Inteleon. So this was pretty much the top Palkia deck. So we're going to take a gander at it, look at it real quick, see if anything is different, fishy, sort of a surprise, I would say. And the only big surprise that I think is really different at all is the Crabominable say that 5 times fast. Crabominable V. Sean, do you remember what Crabominable V does?
I want to say it does more damage based on the amount of damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon.
That is one of them. There are 2 attacks on this Crabominable V, this 220 HP basic V. The first one, trigger Avalanche for 1 water energy. Discard the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. I believe personally that this card was placed for the Mewtwo v Union matchup, truthfully, because it can pretty much turn off the Mewtwo v Union matchup, right? Because they cycle through, you know, healing and using Silene a bunch, and they relatively have a card of like 1 or 2, or they relatively have a deck of like 1 or 2 cards. So being able to just trigger Avalanche and completely shut that down, maybe emptying their deck by a surprise, is pretty good, I would say. So that's what I think it's in there for. But you are right, there is a water colorless attack, Destroyer Punch for 90 plus. This attack does 60 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon, especially, Sean, like you were saying, with Palkia's ability, its V-Star powers, Star Portal, I believe it's called, attaching 3 water energies from your discard, up to 3 water energies from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way you'd like. You can go in and hit a Destroyer Punch right away to knock out maybe a Pokemon that has a lot of damage counters on it but doesn't have a lot of bench Pokemon, so Palkia wouldn't be able to knock it out. So very, very cool. You're playing the Radiant Greninja, Battle VIP Pass cross switchers, big things in this deck. Playing the Tool Jammer and Choice Belt. So I was right on there. It was interesting because I watched the top 4 match, and if you didn't see the Metapod's tweet about it, let me actually pull it up now that I'm thinking about it. I made a funny tweet about it on the Metapod podcast. It's like our best ever performing tweet, almost, I would say. There was a moment where James prized 6 Pokemon. Sean.
Oh my.
6 Pokemon at once. And so if you see in James's list, oops, it's refreshing. If you see in James's list, he did play a Hisuian Heavy Ball. So that Hisuian Heavy Ball really put in some work. But this was one of the wackiest prize mixes that I've seen personally. And it was absolutely hilarious. But Sean, is this kind of what you imagine Palkia V-Star would be in terms of a deck at Worlds, just kind of the old faithful, or did you expect anything a little different?
No, I mean, this seems about right. Like you said, like the small differences here are the Crabominable. I think not all Palkia decks are going to opt for Zigzagoon or Quick Shooting anymore. I think some decks might find space, not play the Quick Shooting. But again, if you have Crabominable, the Zigzagoon as well, if you're going to play the Scoop Up Nuts, it really is useful because if you're trying to stretch to hit that knockout, like you said, maybe your opponent didn't bench 1 extra Pokemon, or you're just off on the damage by a small amount. Maybe Choice Belt's not available, it can't get you there. Yeah, those little math fixers I think help Palkia quite a bit. But otherwise, pretty straightforward. I think, just seeing the Radiant Greninja in action, really putting in work, getting 2 prizes off of any of those like bench sitters, like those Pumpkaboos or
all those little EVs,
EVs. Yeah, like being able to, like, you see an EV come down on your opponent's side and you're like, I need to get rid of that.
Yeah.
And then you can like, okay, I'll use the ability of Star Portal now, power up this Radiant Greninja, snipe the EV and something else on the bench, and just take care of that problem before it becomes one. Really good strategy there.
And it's likely that you're not going to be using Moonlight Shuriken, I believe it's called, whatever the attack is on the Radiant Greninja. It's likely that you're going to only be able to use Radiant Greninja for that attack 1 time, right? Because its 3 energy costs is just super tough to do in a single turn outside of Star Portal. I think it's actually impossible to do in 1 turn outside of Star Portal. But anyways, to my point, even if you're just delaying an Eevee that Jolteon with a memory capsule for 1 turn, right? Maybe they had an EV down, they put it down their last turn, and so you knock it out. They put an EV down right away again. You still had a very valuable effort in saving time and collecting multiple prizes, probably, or setting up a prize. I saw this a lot with the Radiant Greninja attack, setting up damage on something like the Pikachu VMAX, the flying Pikachu V or VMAX that was in place, setting up that damage so then the Origin form Palkia can come in and blast it with its attack. And so I thought that was really, really cool. You bought yourself an extra turn, but that extra turn that you bought was super valuable to use your Shady Dealings abilities. I will say, in your point about the Galarian Zigzagoon, it wasn't just one damage counter that it added to your field in the end of it. It's actually more than that because it's a benched Pokemon on your side. So really smart, really smart. Works well with Palkia in comboing with the scoop up nets, like you said, to where you could get like 3 or 4 extra damage on a Pokemon to help reach that knockout. So just a little cool thing, the next level deck builders really think about that maybe Sean and I would not have guessed right away. But you know what? That's why we tell you about the decks and explain it to you after the fact. But Sean, there was a lot of other things in these World Championships, including the Mew VMAX list. Andre Chiasson, I don't know exactly how to say it, but they're Canadian. They're from Canada. 6th place with Mew VMAX. So let's just go over Mew VMAX. In my opinion, this wasn't much different at all to the other Mew VMAX decks we've seen. I guess the most different thing was that there's no basic energies, right? If you were worried about Arceus Duraludon in the format, you would have probably played at least one psychic energy, but Andre saying, no, that deck's bad. And you know what? It didn't really show up. So I guess it worked out all in their favor. And then also the Echoing Horn in this deck. Some Mew decks play Echoing Horn, some don't. It just all depends. But Sean, did you think, we had been talking about how, Mew hadn't been doing super, super hot as of late towards before Worlds, did you think that Mew was going to innovate a little bit more? Or did you feel like, this version of Mew is probably the best it's going to get?
I think this is, until there's another card that comes out, which I don't think there will be, I think this is the best it's going to get. The deck, this is one of those instances where Pokemon's design team, they made Fusion Strike a thing. They made Mew VMAX reliant on Fusion Strike. They made Genesect's ability reliant on the number of Fusion Strike Pokemon, right?
Mm-hmm. They made Meloetta. They made Meloetta dependent on the number of Fusion Strike energies that go on Fusion Strike Pokemon.
Right. So it's a very neat little bow they built. But the problem with a bow like that is it doesn't really have a lot of flexibility. The things that make the deck really good, like power tablets as well, and Eliza's Sparkle, they don't work in any other deck, and no other cards work in this deck. So I was not surprised that there's no innovation. I don't think there will be. I think the deck will continue to be just an incredibly consistent deck that can hit really big numbers, if you high roll. And it just seems like Andre, from what I heard, he'd been playing Mew a long time, and he was just like, I'm going to high roll, I'm just going to play a deck that will go really fast, that can take out any of these V-Stars on any given turn with power tablets, and has the potential to just donk your opponents. There was one game I think Andre had in top 8, maybe, where I think he rolled a Cram-O-Matic, and he got a Tails. And if he had a Heads, the game would have been over, and I'm pretty sure he would have won that series and gone on to top 4. And that's what it came down to, right? It was a Cram-O-Matic Tails that probably stood between him and top 4. But that's just what this deck is,
I will say the one variation of the deck, there's usually a extra slot in a Pokemon, and sometimes that slot goes to Oricorio, right? Fusion Strike Pokemon prevents damage, makes your Mew VMAX a little bit bulkier. Andre opting in instead of Oricorio to put in Pumpkaboo, not a Fusion Strike Pokemon, but you've seen, if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you've seen a lot of the lists that are not Palkia playing this Pumpkaboo, because Path to the Peak was very, very prevalent in terms of the thingamadoodah, the stadium of choice for a lot of players. Thank you, Sean. The stadium of choice for a lot of players and a lot of decks. So with Path to the Peak shutting down Genesect V, the Pumpkaboo was an excellent addition that ended up working out very, very well from him. And speaking of Path to the Peak as well, Pokemon released a code for Pokemon TCG Online. It works on both live and the original PTCGO client if you want it. It is Worlds 22 London. You type that into the code section, where you usually put your pack codes. You type Worlds 22 London, no spaces, 22 is the number. Capitalization, I don't think matters at all, and you get a free gold Path to the Peak Stadium card. So I did it like yesterday or something like that, and it still worked. It came out on Thursday. It's limited to like only the first 100,000 redemptions or whatever. I think we've talked about their mechanic of doing this on the podcast before, and I don't ever remember it running out ever. So you can wait on it, but what?
I think most people will be good. Like, if you listen to this and you want it, go get it now, because you also don't know, like, they may just turn the code off at some point.
Yes, exactly. They may just turn it off after like a couple weeks, because probably not many other people are going to be putting in that code, and so it's wasting space and whatnot. But anyways, Sean, let's go into what I would consider to be my favorite deck from the championships. It was the big surprise from Adam Hawkins of Great Britain, placed 13th overall with Arceus V-Star Aggron. Sean, Aggron VMAX. Do you know what that card does?
No, I have no idea.
I don't either. I'm going to be looking it up so then we don't get anything wrong. This was the biggest surprise in my opinion. Top 16 as well with this card that I do not know what it does. It is a Steel VMAX Pokemon, 330 HP, big, beefy Aggron boy. First attack for 3 energies, 1 metal, and 2 colorless. Cracking Stomp for 150 damage. Discard the top card of your opponent's deck. So, could be good in the Mewtwo V Union matchup, with that discard ability, or even some other decks. I know Sander, one of my favorite players, he played Stonejourner VMAX. That's kind of a, not necessarily control, it's more of a stally type deck, but if their deck gets real low, because they've been healing for a while and whatnot, you could just be like, get them out of there. But the other attack, max takedown, 2 metals, 3 colorless, 270 damage, Sean, which is a lot of damage. This Pokemon does 30 damage to itself. And looking at Adam Hawkins' list, different damage modifiers, Galarian Zigzagoon, a pair of those in there with the choice belts. So not only can Arceus V-Star knock out, little Arceus Vs, flying Pikachus, Hisuian Decidueyes on the field, but Aggron can reach up and start one-hit KOing all of the V-Stars. Arceus can even potentially reach Mew. Well, choice belt is 300. You would have to make sure you can ping with the Zigzagoon to get 320, but that seems very difficult, especially with the Fusion Strike energy, but still possible, if you get lucky. But using the Bibarel engine as well, similar to the winning list of Worlds, Arceus V-Star and Bibarel, a top tier combo. Drawing cards, heavy count of bosses orders. This deck, though, playing 2 Raihans, one of the only top lists playing like multiple Raihans that wasn't like a one prize deck. Very, very cool, in my opinion, to see that yet again. And Aggron VMAX shot.
Right. I mean, it hits big numbers, right? Like 270 is a lot, especially like, if
especially in Arceus and Palkia heavy meta, right?
Yeah, like, and if you have to put a double turbo on it, goes down to 250, but then the choice belt pumps you back up to 280, which is exactly what you need for Arceus and Palkia. It is basically impossible for Arceus and Palkia. They're not going to one shot you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, like the only problem you would run into with this is like, the powering a second Aggron up. I guess you probably just never do that. You go 2 RCS stars, 1 Aggron VMAX, and that's the line,
Yeah,
right? That your opponent has to get through.
you are playing a 2-1 line of Aggron VMAX without any recovery cards in terms of like an ordinary rod or something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, look, it's a beefy little stack for your opponent to get through. Congrats to Adam. I think my favorite, Jake, we don't have to pull it up, but my favorite deck was definitely Radiant Charizard.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because you think about like single prize decks, and like how it's really hard to pilot a single prize deck to beat these really big VMAXs and V stars, especially if you're not hitting for weakness. Um, there's it's resource intensive to do that. But then you actually sit and think about Radiant Charizard, and you're like, wait, I can't play 4 copies of Radiant Charizard. I can only play 1.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, it's your main attacker, and you have to play 1. You assume it gets killed immediately, then you have to recycle it back into your deck, and within 1 or 2 turns of that, get it back onto the bench, fully powered up again, and do it again, right? And it's just like that. It's just so much. It just seems like a crazy idea to have your whole deck's attacking strategy be reliant on a one of, but several people seem to make it work quite well, and that was impressive to me.
And one of the people that made it work was actually Ross Coffin. So Ross Coffin actually placed 15th at the World Championships Day 2 standings. Ended up placing, top 16 with that. And we don't have a list exactly right now. There hasn't been one posted on PokeStats. You could probably, I don't know, did he play on stream? Sean, do you remember? He did. So you could probably, so you could probably net deck him if you watch back the stream to understand what exactly happened or what he was playing. But Sean, we're going to get into some other kind of news that's come up in terms of that. That's all the decks that we're going to talk about, because also before we get into this point that actually I'm going to make, rotation doesn't start until January 2023, so the lists that we've shown you in here and talked about are great to start playing like right now. I mean, rotation doesn't start until January, so nothing's going to change. Lost Origin doesn't become legal for another month in terms of tournaments and stuff. So if you go to any official Pokemon events or your league is playing official Pokemon standard format, especially after Lost Origin releases, you can play any of these decks that you can build, and you can make it work that way. And again, shout out to PokeStats for always trying to keep everybody up to date in terms of their stuff, especially, in crunch time, day of these events happening. But let's talk about the post news of the World Championships. One of the things that I saw on Twitter didn't necessarily make headlines, but it was something that I thought was really cool and important. Sean and I have been very vocal about Pokemon TCG Live and how it's bad, right?
It's challenging.
And one of the people that was at the World Championships, Kalos Network, they were over there and they found a table of the Pokemon TCG Live developers, the actual coders of the app. And they were sitting there and, letting people talk to them about, how it's going, what are they doing, things like that. Like, leave feedback, free to just discuss what is going on. And I hope nobody really heckled them or anything like that, because I never want to do that to an individual, but the community has been very open about how disappointing it's been. And so Kalos Network asked them some things and maybe sat in, some of the other discussions that some other people had. I'm not sure. But they said at this table, 1, all of the mechanics had to be written from scratch. So they didn't get any help really from Direwolf Digital, essentially. They didn't say hey, what did you code to make a card in standard format? And they didn't just copy and paste it from Pokemon Trading Card Game Online. So that is kind of a cool thing transparency wise. You know, I mean, I've never said that it's easy to make a game or anything like that. I don't know a single thing about coding. But I would imagine having to write all the mechanics from scratch is not an easy task. Sean, do you have any experience coding or anything like that? Or programming?
No, I mean, I don't. I'm not a programmer. What I will say is like I'm assuming that the underlying engine, I don't know exactly what that fully entails, but like the underlying engine of PTCG Live though, the code base was just so different from
Mhm.
Direwolf that it was probably difficult, if not impossible, to port, and that's why it had to be rewritten from scratch. Now, that would make sense to me, right? Because like the platform that it's built on is probably very different, like the actual code base,
Mhm.
and that to me makes sense.
The second point that they had mentioned was the YouTuber feedback was very useful, if not brutal. So, I mean, again, the community is very open to talking about why we dislike Pokemon Trading Card Game Live in comparison to what it's hyped up to be, things like that. But this is really, really cool that they're aware. You know, the videos that content creators have posted, Andrew Mahone, Azul GG, Celios Network, literally everybody, right? If you make Pokemon TCG content, it's been helpful. They're listening. They're understanding, you know, the things that we like, the things that we don't like. And we mentioned the other day, or sometime on this podcast within the last couple episodes about, you know, an update to Pokemon Trading Card Game Live that they made and how there are some things that are different. You know, in the battle scene, they changed up the space design, you know, the extra space to fill it up a little bit more and not feel so bland or empty. So it's really cool that they're listening, and I don't know if they'd be able to, you know, hear and change to all of our concerns, but at least they're aware of it. So then they have a base point of like, you know, priority list, I will say, if that makes sense.
Good to know.
Point 3, development is going well and the beta is giving them exactly what they need. I don't know exactly like what
I mean, I think it basically is like, hey, we're continuing. We're not shutting the project down.
Okay. I don't know exactly like how that entails because again, I've never made a video game before in my life, but I think it's good to bring this up. I don't know if that includes the like survey that I had mentioned a couple weeks ago and linked in the show notes of one of our previous episodes. They had like this Pokemon TCG live beta survey that you could fill out, and I did a call to action for people to fill it out. I don't know if they're referencing that in terms of beta is giving them exactly what they needed.
Oh, they're just referencing that the current version of the game, which is considered in beta right
Okay.
now. Like all of the feedback, all of the bugs that they're finding, like the point of a beta is that it's not a full release, right? So like you're not trying to say that this is a finished product. I think some of the problem though is like you made a beta of a game, but then you had some people in some regions, like you gave them the option to port their entire like inventory of cards over that you can't get back. And like
Yeah.
they warned people, but like that just should never have been a feature that could be turned on if you really weren't confident that your game would not be playable, right? Like, I don't know.
I have this like weird thing though, like I guess the other option is to just make everybody start from scratch, right? Everybody just has like a brand new account when they load in Pokemon Trading Card Game Live Beta, right? That's like the other option. Or I guess a third option is to just basically give everybody a demo account, like a demo, everything unlocked. You know, some people have those accounts. They used to give those accounts out to people where literally they have 4 locked copies of every single card in the game, so then they never have to trade or go out and get stuff, and they can build literally whatever they want. I guess those are the other 2 options that you could do, but I don't know.
Personally, I think if they just kept it like, hey, for this version, your accounts are separate. You can't transfer anything, so you got to start from scratch. But like, that's not the point. Isn't to play the most competitive Pokemon immediately. The point is to test all the mechanics, right?
Yeah.
So like, Yeah, to me, that would have been a safer beta, but, it's done. It is done.
But the final thing that they had mentioned is new people have been brought into the team who worked on other card games. So this is a thing that you'll hear basically anybody who harps on Pokemon Trading Card Game Live. They bring up other card games such as Hearthstone and things like that, other online card games, Magic the Gathering Arena, that do X, Y, and Z things, and why Pokemon is doing A, B, and C instead, and how it doesn't make sense. So really, really cool. I don't know what the team looked like before. I don't know what it looks like now in terms of how many people came from other card games, what their backgrounds were, who on the team prior to this, was working in other card games prior. We don't know those specifics or anything like that. But it's always good to have new people brought into the team, right, who has worked on other card games. And so that makes me feel like Pokemon is actually willing to invest more into this. And so it's not like they're actively trying to make this better, right? Like they're not just saying deal with it, take it,
No,
like it feels like they care.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, who knows what the long term will be, but the people on the team seem to feel like this is continuing. We're going to keep working on it. I don't know what the relationship with Direwolf Studios is, Direwolf Digital. It very well could be that this has to work, that like long term, they are not going to end up having a contract with Direwolf, that's the plan. Who knows? You can always change plans, but like, I'm guessing that was always the plan, is to transition over. So hard to not.
I will say though, I mean, I don't know if I'll really play a ton of TCG Live when it comes out, right? But like, I definitely won't play it if it's as bad as it is right now. Yeah, if it's as bad as it is right now, I will not play it more than likely. But you know what I am excited about, Sean?
What is that, Jake? I think I know.
The new things that the Pokemon Company has announced in terms of the future of the Pokemon trading card game. They announced the new mechanic. Pokemon EXs are returning in the Scarlet and Violet era that have been revealed at Worlds. And when we talk about Pokemon EX, we're not talking about the we're not talking about the XY era of the EXs. We're talking like Ruby Sapphire type era EXs and some beautiful, beautiful cards that they revealed. There's an advertisement right there. We have Koraidon EX and Miraidon EX. These are the two new box legendaries in the Pokemon trading card game. And so I don't want to talk about these cards and their effects too much right now. One, because we don't know what type they are. We don't know their energy cost on their attacks. But also, if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you're watching the video version of the podcast, you'll see in their abilities that there's an awkward amount of space between the word basic and energy, or basic and Pokemon. And the theory behind this, I don't remember who it was. I think it was one of the Szymanskis that pointed this out, that when this card gets fully revealed, because we don't even know the HP of these two Pokemon cards yet, so there's still more to be shown in terms of their what they actually are. These cards probably only adhere to specific typings of Pokemon and or energies, which make them not as good as they look first glance if you just take this as law right here. So I don't want to talk about them too much, but it kind of showed off, what these EX cards are going to look like generally, along with a bunch of other cards that they revealed as well. They showed this really, really cool thing, in my opinion, of a basic EX Mimikyu, a stage one very clearly being shown here, not blurred out, darkened out, a stage 1 EX in Lucario, and then also, Sean, a stage 2. So we are going to be getting a multi-prizer stage 2 Pokemon again in the trading card game. Them showing off this Magnezone, and you can tell it evolves because just like the Lucario, it has the little text that says evolves from Magneton. So very, very cool. I know a lot of people were excited about this, Sean. How do you feel about it, just first reaction?
I mean, it's cool that I think they're sticking to 2 prizers, right? I think that they realize their mistake with 3 prize Pokemon. Um, with tag teams especially, and then VMAXs. V-Star, I think, is a return, and I think they've seen a lot of success with like, hey, we can make evolving 2 prize Pokemon worthwhile for people. Arceus V-Star, Palkia V-Star. Like the whole tournament, aside from like, Flying Pikachu and Mew, is dominated by, evolving 2 prizers. And these are gonna, I think, be a nice return to like your setup Pokemon maybe not being the beefiest things on the board, and you're spending the energy. Maybe, who knows? I really hope that with this new stage 2 EX mechanic, I hope they bring back the an old version of rare candy, right? Maybe it's a rare candy that lets you go from a stage 1 into from a basic into a stage 2, only for EXs more quickly. But like, to me, like that is something that I'm really excited about, them keeping it at 2 prizers. So I think we'll see. Outside of that, to your point, we really don't know anything else of the mechanics. But I do think if people want to know what might be in store for the future of the Pokemon TCG, it might be worth it to go look back at Ruby and Sapphire era and see what other mechanics and rules and things they might bring back, because Pokemon seems to be doing a lot of that lately.
And especially with the Terrastall, I believe it's called. We talked about this a couple weeks ago on the podcast, the new battle mechanic in the video games mentioned. This is putting my tinfoil hat theory on right now, Sean. They mentioned in that, when they were talking about this battle mechanic, that Pokemon's typing could change when doing this Terrastall form, right? Flying Pikachu in the video games, when it becomes a Terrastall version, a Terrastall Pikachu becomes a flying type. So there may be something in the future. I don't know. Maybe something like the Radiant Pokemon, or the Amazing Pokemon, where it's just a couple sets. They may have Delta species or some former variants like that again, which I would be so excited about, Sean. I want Delta species Pokemon so bad in this.
Yeah, was Delta species a product of the EX era, the original EX era?
Yes, it was a product of the original EX era, Ruby Sapphire.
I mean, so I think that, honestly, I think that gives you some good hints of like, hey, if you wanted to make guesses, it's a really good guess, and I think a lot of people would be psyched for that.
We do know a little bit of the HPs of at least the 3 Pokemon provided. The Mimikyu has 190 HP, the Lucario has 260, and then it doesn't show on this, but I'm like, when I think about it, I'm like 87% sure that I saw somewhere that Magnezone had 330 HP.
Yeah.
I
heard that too.
I don't have that in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I saw that on Twitter. So very, very cool. Oops, wrong screen. Very, very cool in my opinion, and very, very excited for the cards. I mean, I'm excited that the EX mechanic and some of those cards are coming back, because as someone who's been playing for a couple of years, both you and I, Sean, we didn't play during that time, when the EX of Ruby and Sapphire first came out. So now having it come back, kind of feels like we're not going to have missed anything, really, except Delta species.
I think it's smart for Pokemon to bring things like this back, because I do think that EX era, and maybe a little bit before that, I think the game has become so much more popular in the last 6 or 7 years.
And
play.
Different in general.
Exactly. And so like now you can introduce, like you can breathe new life into all these old mechanics that a whole new generation of players, both young and adult, just never got to experience. So it makes sense.
And even if it's somewhat of the same, maybe you're like, oh my gosh, why don't they just create new things instead of bringing back these old things? I feel like it's going to be different enough to where, like, it's not going to feel like you're playing in 2008 or whenever Ruby, Sapphire, Delta species stuff was going around. That EX era was going around. I feel like it's going to be different enough to where, like, if you did, you know, maybe you have been playing for a long time like that, like Michael Pramawat, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe if you're like Michael, like, it feels different enough. Like, it gives you some nostalgia, sure, but it's different enough to where you still feel like you're playing a new format. You're not like repeating a format. But Sean, that wasn't the only thing announced at the World Championships. I would ask you if I would ask you to take a guess where Pokemon Worlds 2023 would be, but I think you already know. So I'll give the listeners a couple seconds. Leave a guess about where you think it's going to be. I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's going to be at Yokohama, Japan. Sean, I'm going to go. Nobody's going to stop me. I'm going to Worlds 2023. I mean, I have to.
I will. Jake, I have to. I applaud you. Go. The person who might stop you might be the Japanese government.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean,
we can get into it.
I mean, I won't get too far into it. The logistics can be thought of later at a different date. Just let me live in my euphoria now. But anyways, going into this, Pokemon 2023 Worlds was announced in Yokohama, Japan. It's the real life inspiration for Vermilion City's Vermilion City in Red and Blue. And so, you know, they make this yearly announcement all the time. Now, we don't know the exact dates of when Worlds is going to be. It was probably like late August or whatever, but we don't know the exact dates in 2023. But that'll be announced. We don't exactly know, but it'll probably be around January. TPCI made the official release for 2022 Worlds in terms of the dates in March. But, you know, a lot of people are worried that March isn't soon enough in terms of an amount of time to plan and stuff to travel across the world. And I would just say to that, we're still in a worldwide pandemic, I feel like. Even though it's getting better and even though we've managed it a lot more, I think there is still always that chance that Worlds 2022 is going to be canceled, right? I still think, like, I don't think that was out of the realm of possibilities. You know, I think they planned on potentially that may happen if the worst came to worst. But I think we're at a point now in the world that we can securely kind of say in 2023 at this point. You know, there are definitely more regulations in different areas of the world, including Japan, that you'd have to follow. And so that's why I think that TPCI is going to announce way earlier than March, you know, in terms of these specific dates. So then people can act accordingly and have plenty of time to be able, whether you are someone that plans on qualifying for Worlds, which, by the way, we don't know the point structure yet. We just know that cups and challenges are not going to be a thing, but we do know about the regional list, which we won't get to today. We'll get to in a different podcast in a future week. But I mean, I'm so excited, Sean. I don't plan on qualifying for Worlds because I don't have enough time to play. I got a full-time job that pays for my eyes, my teeth, you know, my heart, stuff like that. So that takes priority on my weekends, but I'm definitely going to try to go and at least, you know, go to Japan, right?
I mean, yeah, like part of me would love to go. The other part of me is like, making a trip to Japan is a big, you know,
that's a huge commitment.
Huge. And I'm also like, if it is in August, and I'm going to tell anybody this who's considering this, like, if you're going to go all the way to Japan, you probably want to spend a little bit more time there, especially if you're from the Western Hemisphere, or even Europe, honestly. But August in Japan, in Yokohama, is going to be hot.
Yeah, it's going to be so hot.
And there have been heat waves in Japan this year that were like record breaking. Who knows what it's going to be next year? But I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, it's like, I don't know if I want to like commit to a 2 to 3 week vacation in Japan. Like, if I'm going to go all the way there, right? In the middle of August. Now, I say that while sitting in Seoul in the middle of August.
Mr. Korea right now.
But it's like, it's very warm here. And Yokohama, I know, is hotter. And so I'm just kind of like, it's not the most ideal time of year to travel there for vacation. Obviously, that's not Pokemon's main concern, but I think is going to, that amongst many other things, is going to make it very challenging for some. But hey, shout out to all the Asian like, players and
even Australian fans. Too.
Yeah.
Australia now has a huge accessibility to the world championships, right? Whereas before, they pretty much have to always travel because not very many events are held in Japan or near Japan. So being in Japan is just, it's got to be super nice for them.
Yeah. And look, you got to hope that like it being in Japan, the Japanese arm of the Pokemon Company, like the Big Daddy version, that they will probably like want to really do it up big. The city of Yokohama is going to probably do it up really big for Pokemon. Like that's a lot of these districts, like they want this tourism. So I think it will be quite a spectacle, even compared to London or any other place that could have been held before, because Pokemon is just such a bigger part of the Japanese community in many ways. Like, because the company is there, right?
It's the main headquarters of Pokemon.
Exactly. So I think if you can make it out, you will probably be treated to the biggest spectacle of Pokemon that you won't find anywhere else. So,
and I mean, personally, I think it's best case scenario for like me personally to go as more of like a spectator. Like I do not plan on getting my invite. I may try to play in the open or something like that, but I'm not going to try to go and qualify for the world championships. So, because I want to go and like, I want to go just see all, I mean, you look around my room and you probably could guess that I want to go to Japan before this was announced. So like, it was like perfect timing almost. It was just like Pokemon looked at me and they were like, let's get this guy over here. And so they were like, here's another reason to go. But yeah, it's not as easy as just saying, I want to go to Worlds.
Yeah. But
there are many other things. Yeah. Super, super cool. Well, Sean, do you have anything else that you want to mention in this podcast?
No. I mean, if there are any listeners in Korea who hear this, in South Korea, in Seoul specifically, and you want to hit me up on Twitter and tell me where to go and what to do or whatever, hang, whatever. I'm here. I doubt it. I don't think we have any listeners from Seoul, Jake. But
I don't know either. But you never know. You never know. Message Sean on Twitter. Message Sean on Twitter at GyroSean. You can see it down there on screen if you're watching this video version, or at MetapodTCG if you would rather message us on the Metapod podcast. The regional schedule has come out, and the Lost Origin set list has also come out in the last couple days or so, but we're going to save that for another pod because Sean is busy on vacation, so I don't want to take too much of your time, and we want to dedicate especially to the Lost Origin set list. We want to dedicate a full cast to that, right? A cast of it, because there's probably not going to be a lot of news in the next couple weeks, just after Post-World. So thank you so much for listening to the Metapod podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta, around the evolving world, evolving world. We're here on one side and over on the other side of the world, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.